or visits this road does and always has done out of a common sense of safety and consideration for others. Can you air this matter again, please? Yes, we can. We can even air the emailer. Brian Anderson of Richmond Hill Road. Good afternoon, Brian.
Greetings. That's a hell of an introduction.
People can look at Richmond Hill Road online if they want to, but can you describe it for us?
It's a narrow road which has been there certainly since the early beginning of the 20th century, probably before. Until fairly recently, it ran out, I'd say about 30 years ago. There was just a few houses above mine on the second straight heading up the road. And then much further up, there used to be a very steep 9-hole golf course, which about 7 or 8 years ago got closed down and subdivided up into some rather small and extremely costly sections up on the top of the hill.
All right.
So the net result is that we've still got the same narrow old road leading partially, two-thirds of the way up the hill to feed what's now a massive increase in traffic volume on that hill.
All right. I need to ask you some quick-fire questions, if you don't mind. Does anyone use the footpath?
Rarely. There's a few people every day, but it is a handful, and I can say that with certainty because, you know, I sit down there often enough working on things at the bottom of my hill, and so I see the numbers, but it's only ever a handful every day.
When you tried shifting your car to a legal park to comply, what happened then?
Well, within about an hour, my wife was aware that there was a concrete mixer coming up the hill because there was an endless procession of heavy vehicles going up and down to build the new houses up the top of the hill, and he was having some difficulty getting past.
Right. Okay, so
it creates congestion.
You've been ticketed, but everyone else is still parking on the footpath the way they always do. Yes.
Yeah.
So does someone not like you in the city council? Why are you being, or is everybody being ticketed?
I don't know. I know my immediate neighbour has been ticketed. Near as I can tell, I think what's happening is that the city council employee who comes up to do the ticketing does so between sort of 9 and 5 when he's employed. And, of course, a lot of the other vehicles aren't there 9 to 5, 5 days a week because they've gone to work or whatever. But my vehicle happened to be there those 2 occasions, and so I got ticketed. All
right, and you don't think that's fair? We've got a statement from Christchurch Council which says the footpath is designed in a way that allows vehicles to park partially so as not to obstruct the roadway or the footpath completely. In this instance, the officer observed that the footpath was fully blocked, preventing pedestrian access, Brian.
It's a pretty amazing statement, that the footpath has been designed, I think it just happened to that footpath, and that you're apparently allowed to partially block a footpath. Now, this is entirely news to me. Near as I knew, you weren't allowed to block a footpath at all, and in the normal way of things, I wouldn't. But, you know, the suggestion there is if I'd only been partly blocking it, they wouldn't have been too bothered. But, in effect, if I look at the infringement notice that I've got, it simply says, offence, parking on footpath or cycle path, infringement fee, $40. That's the total information that's on there. So this is an entirely new concept that you're allowed to partially block a footpath.
We'll wait to hear what response you've got officially, whether you get off those tickets. So do let us know. You've heard nothing back yet?
Zilch is the correct expression. And right. Zilch from every councillor I wrote to as well.
Zilch so far. Brian, thank you. We'll be in touch. Brian Anderson on the panel. And that's our lot for the day. Thank you very much for... I know that you're going home to watch the minor leaders debate.
I may be, yes. No, I am.
Perched up in front of the telly?
Always.
Okay.
Always.
And Bernard, I hope you have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, yes.
He's going for a long walk to
Several
solve something.
long walks, and I shall solve so many problems.
Thank you for your company this week, everybody. I hope you all have a very nice weekend. And we are back on Monday. Bernard Hickey and Alan Reid have been on the panel. John Campbell with Checkpoint shortly.
Kia ora. Tonight, 5 years on from a social experiment which compared lunches in a Decile 1 school with lunches in a Decile 10 school, we go back to do it again to see what, if anything, has changed. Of the 26 children in the Decile 1 classroom we visit, 15 had no lunch at all, nothing. Also tonight, death and devastation in the Caribbean. Hurricane Irma decimates Barbuda, causes widespread damage in San Martin and Puerto Rico, and now has Cuba and Florida on its radar. Dozens turn up to a free dental clinic for adults on low incomes. The All Blacks enjoy a touch of country life, and we're there, and we go to Christchurch where the Anglican Synod may be about to make that big decision about the Cathedral.
RNZ News at 5. Maloilale, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. Federated farmers are sounding a warning over Labour's climate change policy, saying it would damage the regional economy. Labour's promising to make the country carbon neutral by 2050 and gradually introduce agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. Farmers would pay for emissions within a first term of a Labour government, 10% to start with. Federated Farmers climate change spokesperson Andrew Hoggard says that would cause hardship in the regions.
If Labor get into power, exactly, they need to really have a good, long, hard look. If they implement all of this stuff, what's it actually going to do to some rural communities? Because I think there are probably some rural communities that would absolutely gut.
Andrew Hoggard from Federated Farmers. But there's some support in the primary sector for Labour's plan. The president of the Forestry Institute, James Treadwell, says there could be real benefits.
If they reduce their emissions in other ways, rather than just paying off or trading in carbon, then they will be, it doesn't have to be that expensive. There are things that the farmers can do to make themselves more efficient from a greenhouse perspective.
James Treadwell from the Forestry Institute. Members of the Christchurch Anglican Diocese have for the first time spoken publicly about the erect cathedral. The 225-member Anglican Synod is underway, with the future of the Christchurch Cathedral one of the main items on the agenda. Logan Church was there.
Synod members had the opportunity today to debate the future of the cathedral, which has lain in ruins since the earthquakes almost 7 years ago. There is strong support for each of the three options: demolish and rebuild, reinstate, or gift the building to the government. Reverend Mark Chamberlain from Pendleton said a $25 million pledge of support from the government showed the community wanted the cathedral rebuilt. However, the Reverend Felicity O'Brien from Linwood said there was no certainty the government pledge would actually materialise, and there were more important uses for the funds. The debates will continue this evening, with a decision on the cathedral's fate expected tomorrow. In Christchurch, ko Logan Church tēnei.
Hurricane Irma is starting to impact on Haiti after cutting a swathe through the islands of the Eastern Caribbean. The Category 5 storm, with winds up to 300 kilometres an hour, has now set a record for its sustained intensity, surpassing that of Cyclone Hainan, which hit the Philippines in 2013. At least 14 people have died in the storm, and thousands more remain in shelters after their homes were damaged or destroyed. Thousands of people in Puerto Rico are without power and water. The ABC's Andy Gallagher reports.
Hurricane Irma ripped into the Caribbean island of Barbuda on Wednesday, levelling almost every structure. The Prime Minister has described the scenes here as heart-wrenching, saying the island is barely habitable. Even as Barbuda faces a large clean-up, officials are concerned that yet another storm may again threaten the Caribbean in the days to come. St Martin too suffered major damage, and as Irma continues to track west, Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas are now in danger. In Florida, evacuations are underway, as forecasters predict Irma has the potential to slam into the state with high winds and huge tidal surges.
Andy Gallagher reporting. An Auckland school principal says up to half of the children at his school arrive hungry, and child poverty is being swept under the carpet. Kingsford Primary School principal Chris Williams has told Checkpoint that children arrive without lunch every day, sometimes as many as half of the 300 students at the school. Mr Williams says this is a direct result of families running out of money. While the school is supported by Fonterra to feed the children breakfast, they're on the waiting list for lunch programs. Mr Williams says children who go without lunch find it more difficult to focus and learn, and empty stomachs make teaching harder. Checkpoint will have more on this after the news. The Opportunity Party's candidate in the Northern Wellington electorate of Ohariu has accused her Labour counterpart of trying to convince her to leave the race. Jessica Hammond-Dobe says 6 weeks ago, Labour's Greg O'Connor asked her to tell her supporters to give him their electorate votes. She says he approached one of her volunteers again this week with a similar message, saying if the election had been held 2 weeks ago, he would have walked in.
He felt that I was a spoiler and that it was interfering with his campaign, that he feels like I'm splitting the left vote and endangering his campaign, were apparently the words he used, and that we should just focus on the party vote and throw our support behind him.
Jessica Hammond-Dobe says she has no intention of doing that, as her loyalty lies with the people of Ohariu, not with Mr O'Connor. Greg O'Connor says he recalls having a vague conversation along those lines, and he'll make a statement later this evening. The Transport Agency is warning the Lewis Pass in Canterbury could need to be closed at short notice due to ice and snow. The pass was shut last night due to heavy snow and had to be shut again this morning after a truck crash. The agency says drivers need to be ready for winter conditions tonight and this weekend, with more snow forecast for Lewis and Arthur's passes. Chains are currently required on Arthur's Pass and no towing vehicles are allowed. Motorists travelling on Lewis Pass today faced delays throughout the day, and as contractors remove the crashed truck and trailer unit. No one was injured in the crash. And news just to hand, a massive earthquake has struck South Mexico. Reports say the quake was a magnitude 8. It was centred off the coast of southern Mexico, close to Guatemala, and initial reports say it was about 30 kilometres deep. Buildings are said to have shaken in Mexico City. It's 5:06. To sport, and a new Grand Slam champion will be crowned at the US Tennis Open after Sloane Stephens beat fellow American Venus Williams in a roller coaster semi-final in New York. Stephens, who returned to competition at Wimbledon after nearly a year off because of a foot injury, recovered from a second set meltdown to end ninth seed Williams' hopes of reaching a third major final this year. She eventually won 6-1, love 6, 7-5.
When I started my comeback, if someone told me I was going to make 2 semis in a Grand Slam final, I would have probably just passed out, because that's what I'm ready to do now. But it's incredible. I don't even know what to say. I don't know how I got here.
Stephens will play compatriot Madison Keys in the final after she beat Coco Vandeweghe in straight sets. New Zealand golfers Lydia Ko and Ryan Fox have both enjoyed strong opening rounds in their latest tournaments. Ko, the former world #1, who's now slipped to 8th on the world rankings, is tied for 4th, 2 shots off the lead after her first round in the latest LPGA event in Indiana. Fox, who's competing at the European Masters in Switzerland, is also in 4th spot, just 1 shot behind the leading trio. A 4-month drought of international cricket will come to an end for the Black Caps next month. New Zealand will head to India for 3 one-day internationals and 3 T20 games. And New Zealand have enjoyed a rare ice hockey victory over Australia with a 4-1 win in the opening game in the Trans-Tasman series in Queenstown. That's the news.
This year's general election is shaping up as one of the most closely fought in years. I'm Guy Espiner. In 2 decades of covering politics, I've never seen an election like it.
Already we've witnessed multiple party leadership changes, polls swinging, but will we see a change of guard in the Beehive? Make sure you join us on election night, September 23rd.
And the following morning, join me, Susie Ferguson and Catherine Ryan for a major wrap-up and reflection on election 17 here on RNZ National.
Funded through New Zealand On Air. Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Showers, some heavy. A period of rain tonight or tomorrow morning with possible squally thunderstorms and hail. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloud increasing. Rain developing in Wairarapa tonight, spreading north tomorrow morning, clearing to isolated showers tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, Marlborough and Nelson, scattered showers, turning to rain this evening, clearing to fine tomorrow morning. However, isolated showers remain about Nelson. Bulla to Fiordland, also the Canterbury High Country and Southern Lakes. Rain, some heavy with thunderstorms and hail. Snow lowering to 500 metres from evening and to 200 metres in the south for a time overnight tonight. For the remainder of Otago and Canterbury, mainly fine. Southland, periods of rain, snow lowering to 500 metres this evening and to 200 metres for a time overnight tonight. And the Chatham Islands, a few showers with rain tomorrow afternoon. It's 5:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Just been handed this. The Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management and GNS Science are currently assessing whether the magnitude 8 earthquake off the coast of Mexico has created a tsunami that could affect New Zealand. If a tsunami has been generated in this location, it is not likely to arrive in New Zealand for at least 12 hours. Any updates, we will bring them to you immediately. It's magnitude 8. It's the southwestern coastline of Mexico, just above the border with Guatemala. We're waiting for more reports, but very early reports suggest damage is not major. The moment we hear anything more than that, we will let you know. Coming up on Checkpoint tonight, the Christchurch Cathedral is a decision imminent after all this time. On the campaign trail in Epsom and the Maori electorates, which offer some fascinating contests. And the latest on Irma, it will almost certainly hit Florida this weekend. But we begin tonight with the school lunch and how very different they can be depending on what school you go to. With child poverty one of the central issues in this election, and both National and Labour setting significant targets for reducing it, the discussion often turns to how to measure it. The Child Poverty Monitor uses an index of material hardship or deprivation developed for the Ministry of Social Development. Food in both quality and quantity is a key measure. 5 years ago, almost to the day, the Campbell Live Current Affairs program conducted a very simple social experiment. Go to a Decile 1 school and go to a Decile 10 school and ask to see what the children are having for lunch. No warning, so parents can't alter reality. No child identified, so no one is embarrassed by their circumstance. What the program found was a difference so striking it contributed to the growth of food in schools programs, Kids Can, the Fonterra Breakfast Club and so on. 5 years on, what's changed? You can watch the story right now online on Facebook on Freeview Channel 50 and on Sky TV Channel 83. Zach Fleming and our cameraman Bradley White went to a Decile 1 school, but first to a Decile 10 school, where lunch looked really great.
Now it's lunchtime and I'm hungry again. I don't know where I should begin.
These are lunches for learning. Filled croissant, banana, peaches, plus some wafers and home baking as treats.
It's 10 to 10 in the morning and we're at a Decile 10 primary school in central Auckland. We can't tell you specifically what one, but the parents of these children had no idea we were coming this morning. They didn't have an opportunity to pack them a special lunch or give them breakfast just for show. But even still, all 19 of the children in this classroom had breakfast.
And all 19 have a packed lunch from home. An apple, yoghurt, sandwiches, muesli bar, snack biscuits, some cheese. This is only a Year 1 student's lunch, but at 25 years old, I'd be content eating it. All but 4 of the 19 had fresh fruit.
Eat it, don't you make me repeat it. Have a banana, have a whole bunch. It doesn't matter what you had for lunch, just eat it.
Any empty desk here is simply because some children aren't at school today. Remember, every child in this classroom ate breakfast today and had a nutritious lunch.
Then we drove 20 minutes south to Kingsford Primary School in Mangere. It's a Decile 1 school and we're in a conjoint Year 5 and 6 classroom. 26 children will learn here today. But on 15 of the desks, more than half, where there should be food, there is instead nothing. And for some of the children in this class, lunch today consists of just a single cookie or a lone bag of chips. Being in this classroom, the difference between a Decile 1 and 10 is startling. It almost leaves you speechless. On this group of desks, 6 children sit here, but only one of them brought food today. This child's morning tea and lunch is a single bag of chips. Over here, chips and biscuits. Out of 26 children, just 4 have an actual lunchbox that's full. And you'll remember at the Decile 10 school, 4/5 of the classroom brought fresh fruit. In this classroom, these 2 lunchboxes out of the total 26 are the only ones that brought fruit today. Principal of Kingsford Primary, Chris Williams, says this is reality.
That's normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill, that's same every day.
He says it's obvious which kids have eaten.
You can see it in the children's behaviour. When you're hungry, you play up, you become more irritable, and it's the same with children. They're a lot more short-tempered. Squabbles can break out over virtually nothing.
If you've woken up in the morning and still not had anything to eat by the time you get to school, you're going to be feeling tired, you're not going to have enough energy, you're not going to be able to pay attention in class, and plus the critical pathways for your brain development are not going to be occurring.
That's Anna Sloan, a paediatric dietitian with more than 20 years experience, both public and private in New Zealand and in the UK. I asked her what would happen if a child only had a small bag of chips in their lunchbox.
It would be better than nothing, but it's certainly not going to be giving your body and brain the nutrients that it needs to develop and retain what you're learning.
Ms Sloan understands better than most what a poor diet can do to children.
Through her public health work, she's seen the worst.
By the time children come to see me, they're in the medical system, they've had faltering growth, they've had failure to thrive, or they've got definite nutritional deficiencies. So by the time they come and see me, they're actually pretty bad.
And the cause?
It's always money, it's always poverty.
Kingsford Primary Principal Chris Williams says he believes poverty in New Zealand is being swept under the carpet. But what about the National Party's recent commitment to lift 100,000 children out of poverty in the next 3 years?
I find it hard to believe, given that they've been in power for so long and so little's been done.
We put that to Bill English. His reply:
he will be dealing on the front line with some quite complex issues with those kids, and we respect the commitment that the schools make to lifting the achievement of these kids, and they're doing a great job in that. So achievement among, if you say, let's say, Pacific kids, where 4 or 5 years ago just over half them were getting NCA level 2. Now it's much closer to 3/4, in some schools 80%. And that means they're getting, thousands more of them are getting to the start line for jobs or further training. Now, with respect to their family situation, this is why the family package we've legislated, which will come in the 1st of April, will be quite significant for those families, because they'll get, if they're on the average wage, $20 a week lower tax, higher child payments, and in particular, where rents have gone up, as they have done in South Auckland, they could be getting up over $100 a week assistance if they have a low income and high rents. And we want to see those families benefit from what's been a strong economy. Government's got a good bank balance, so we're able to spread the benefits around.
In 2015, Parliament narrowly rejected a members' bill proposing free breakfasts and lunches at all Decile 1 and 2 schools. The vote was 61 to 59, National Act and United Future casting the opposing votes. So what is being done to help? The Kickstart Breakfast Programme, a partnership between Fonterra Sanitarium and the government, gives Weet-Bix and milk to around 25,000 children across more than 900 schools every week. The government-funded Fruit in Schools programme gives a piece of fruit free to more than 100,000 kids a day. And charity Kids Can, which is funded through private donations, business and the government, feeds nearly 30,000 children across nearly 700 Decile 1 to 4 schools each week, as well as helping with other things, shoes, raincoats, and basics like toothbrushes and tampons.
So we give the school a supply of food. We also have 100,000 loaves of bread that go out, and that supply of food is used for breakfast and also for lunch as well. There's bread, there's muesli bars, there's scroggin mix, fruit pottles, yoghurt, and in the winter, hot meals as well.
All sounds great, but Kids Can CEO Julie Chapman estimates there are still more than 20,000 children going to school without lunch every week. The charity has a 30-school-strong waitlist, including Kingsford Primary, who are near the bottom of that list. Why can't Kids Can respond immediately? Money.
We think that it'll cost us, we could run a program that would give a range of nutritious items to children for about $4.5 million a year.
That's $4.5 million on top of current private sponsorships and government funding.
So in the great scheme of things, not a lot really.
Statistics NZ estimates there are currently 3.5 million people over the age of 20 in New Zealand. It'd take just $1.30 a year from each of them then, according to Ms Chapman, to make sure no child in New Zealand goes to school without lunch.
Children need food, and we know that when we put food into a school, there's an instant result in increased learning, children being happier, reduced fighting and bullying.
But it's not just about health improvements, remember. Here's Anna Sloan again.
Recent research shows that increased eating frequency through the day actually can lead to a lower BMI, so a reduced risk of obesity. An iron deficiency makes a child fatigued, it makes them unable to retain what they've learned, it affects their growth, and B vitamin can present as inability to pay attention, can also present as lack of developmental growth as well.
That's a dietitian, and at the chalk face, what does the principal say?
They need to be the best that they can be. They've only got one shot at education, and we need to provide them with the best education possible so that they can get out of the cycle, so that they can go to university and, become the best person they can be.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Now, Kingsford Primary School's principal, Chris Williams, you just heard him talking then, says if children tell their teacher they're hungry and have no lunch, they can make sandwiches in the staff room. But school after school we've spoken to tell us children are often too shy to say they're hungry. Julie Chapman from KidsCan told us this afternoon the charity is due more government funding later this month, and she hopes to be able to clear more schools from the waiting list, including Kingsford Primary, before the end of this year. Our political reporter, Demelza Leslie, has spent the day today with National Leader Bill English. This afternoon, she told Mr English about Zach's story and that 15 out of a class of 26 children at Kingsford Primary School had turned up to school with nothing for lunch.
Well, look, if it's happening at all, that's too much. And that is why it's important to lift these families' incomes and deal with the sometimes difficult social circumstances that they're in. And that's our plan to do that. And over recent years, we've made some real progress. For instance, there's 60,000 fewer children in benefit-dependent household. That's because their parents can get jobs and higher incomes. And where we are here today shows the growth and opportunities for those families to lift their incomes. Where they're in very difficult circumstances, of course, MSD are there to be able to provide the transitional or emergency assistance that they need.
Do you think teachers should be helping to feed those children?
No, that's not teachers' primary obligation. It's primarily about what the family can do. But as we know, we've got breakfast in schools programs, for instance, which mean that those kids for whom, for whatever reason, are turning up, particularly in our primary schools, then they get fed.
That's Bill English. We'd love your feedback on this. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, and our email address, as you know, is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. It's 22 minutes past 5. To the Caribbean now, where Hurricane Irma has left a trail of death and destruction and is now starting to lash the Turks and Caicos Islands, with Cuba, the Bahamas and Florida very much in its sights, according to current projections. The Category 5 storm is still packing winds of 300 k's an hour and is pushing waves up to 10 metres high well inland on some islands. It's doing serious damage in some places. At least a dozen people have been confirmed dead. Many islands are completely without power. Aerial photos of the small islands left in its wake show roofs ripped off, cars and containers flipped over, major damage to infrastructure and entire communities that have simply disappeared. Bridget Burke reports.
The desolate streets of Saint-Martin in the aftermath of Irma, the Caribbean island comprising of two separate countries today resembling a war zone. The power of Irma evident as broken cars lay tossed around on the street. Its airport, world famous for its runway alongside popular Maho Beach, is destroyed. Video shot from inside La Beach Hotel shows water and debris carried in by the storm. Containers tossed like blocks on what was once the wharf. Aerial footage showing the extent of Hurricane Irma's fury. A helicopter capturing destroyed homes and boats.
Yeah, it's gonna land right on Delano's yellow car. That's where it's gonna.
A family watches from their home on the Caribbean island of St. Thomas as Irma peels off their garage roof.
I gotta go and help because the living room is getting flooded, so I'll come back to you guys soon.
Irma has already wreaked havoc across Saint-Martin and Anguilla and caused catastrophic damage to Barbuda, where 90% of the island's buildings have been destroyed. The British archipelago of Turks and Caicos and the Dominican Republic were next, and then Cuba. And after devouring the Caribbean, Hurricane Irma is now setting her sights on Florida. The National Hurricane Center issued a hurricane watch of the entire southern end of the state. Florida Governor Rick Scott issued a grave warning.
Look at the size of this storm. It's huge. It is wider than our entire state and could cause major and life-threatening impacts on both coasts, coast to coast. Every Floridian, every family should be take this seriously and be aggressive. You've got to protect your family.
Irma, still a Category 5 storm and one of the biggest ever recorded in the Atlantic, packing winds of close to 300 kilometres an hour. It's expected to slam Florida with a huge storm surge that could bring water up to 3 metres above the ground. Manuel Estrella lives on Miami Beach.
This is huge. It's really huge. And, these surges by the beach, the water's going to come up really high. You get trapped in your homes. It's really scary.
President Trump expressing his concern from the White House.
And these horrible things that we call hurricanes, this is something that is probably bigger, not as much water, but much more power than Harvey.
Many of the 6 million residents on Florida's heavily populated East Coast are seeking safer refuge. The sheer size of that exodus is clogging roads and draining petrol stations. Tracking company GasBuddy reported 43% of stations in the Miami area and 1/3 in West Palm Beach and Tampa are completely out of fuel. The governor ordered police escorts for station refuelling trucks so fuel replenishments can get through quicker. Residents were heeding warnings Irma is expected to be even more ferocious than Hurricane Andrew 25 years ago. Andrew, a Category 5 storm when it hit, devastated Florida and is still on record as one of the costliest storms in US history. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
And later in the program, we'll cross to a CNN correspondent who is in Florida awaiting Irma and talk to him about how they are getting people out of, areas that are very low-lying and seriously at risk. You're with Checkpoint. The time is 26 minutes past 5. Buoyed by another good poll result, the Labour Party has announced an ambitious climate change policy on the campaign trail today. The Labour leader Jacinda Ardern and Nationals Bill English are on the road again after a feisty live debate last night. The Colmar-Brunton poll, of course, had Labour ahead 43-39. Climate change was a big topic at the press debate, and now Ms Ardern has unveiled Labour's goal to get net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But National and Federated Farmers say Labour's policy would seriously hurt the economy, particularly in the regions. Jacob McSweeney filed this report.
The waiata Jacinda Ardern got from students at Hillmorton High School in Christchurch this morning is typical of the reception she's getting around the country. But despite polls starting to show Labour in the lead, she's still taking nothing for granted.
Oh, look, I'm certainly heartened by them, but the polls that we're seeing generally are really moving a little bit all over the place at the moment. I'm not certainly focusing on any one poll. We've got to make sure that we continue to work as hard as we can right up till the election day. Heartening, but we're certainly not resting.
Well, thank you, Mark. I've been doing so many political debates lately, I'm feeling a bit lonely up here with just me. But don't worry, I won't start an argument.
Out visiting schools and businesses in Auckland today, Bill English said it was game on.
We've got a couple of weeks to go yet. The polls show what I think everyone is now knows, and that is this is a very tight competitive election. We're campaigning hard on a positive direction to build on the strength of New Zealand.
However, today Ms Ardern had carbon emissions in her sights.
Okay, well, kia ora koutou. Thank you for joining us here at Hillmorton today. We're reaffirming our commitment, which
Ms Ardern announced Labour's plan for addressing climate change while at Hillmorton High School. It would make farmers pay for emissions within its first term, 10% to start with. Ms Ardern says an independent body would look at how its zero carbon policy could be achieved.
Ultimately, it's the responsibility of a government to respond to the challenges that exist, and voters will sometimes be really deeply engaged on that issue and sometimes not, but it is up to us to make sure we maintain our international responsibilities.
Bill English says Labour's policy would create hardship in the regions.
By the time they deal with the water tax, some sort of land tax, capital gains tax, every dollar that comes out of those farms and other businesses into the government coffers is currently going into those regions.
Federated Farmers climate change spokesperson Andrew Hoggard echoes those concerns.
If Labor get into power, exactly, they need to really have a good, long, hard look. If they implement all of this stuff, what's it actually going to do to some rural communities? Because I think there are probably some rural communities that would absolutely gut.
But there is support for Labour's proposal. The president of the Forestry Institute, James Treadwell, says there could be real benefits.
If they reduce their emissions in other ways, rather than just paying off or trading in carbon, then they will be, it doesn't have to be that expensive. There are things that the farmers can do to make themselves more efficient from a greenhouse perspective.
Labour's announcement is straight out of the Green Party playbook. That party is just days away from its own climate change policy launch on Sunday. But its leader, James Shaw, says he's not bothered.
I'm really delighted that Labor have come to the party on that. Without the Greens, you have to ask, would they have gotten there? I don't know. But it is great that they are there, because I think what that shows is that a Labor-Green government jointly will get that target in place.
Tonight, TVNZ will host the leaders of potential coalition partners. However, the lineup won't include the Opportunities Party leader Gareth Morgan after he lost his legal challenge to participate, or Winston Peters, who is refusing to take part. Mō te otaka o te ahi, ko Jacob McSweeney aho.
The Anglican Synod is underway in Christchurch with a decision about the future of the city's quake-stricken cathedral expected as soon as tomorrow. The cathedral was severely damaged in the February 2011 quake. 6.5 years on, its future or lack of one has been debated, delayed and deeply divisive. But all that could be coming to an end. Our reporter Logan Church has been at the Synod meeting.
Yes, John. Well, I'm standing here at the church where the Synod is meeting today in Christchurch. The big hot ticket item is, of course, the Cathedral. The Cathedral's been lying in the centre of Christchurch for quite some time, 6-7 years since the earthquakes. It's boarded up, surrounded by fences, held up by shipping containers, metal struts, more of a house of pigeons and a house of worship at the moment. So there's a loss of eyes on the meeting, which is happening just behind me right now, about what the future of the building could be. And there are actually 3 options on the table at the moment. There is option A, which is to reinstate the building as it was, and this is the option that is preferred by both the government and the city council down here. There is option B, which is to demolish the building that is there now and build something new. And then there's also an option C, which the church has proposed, which is to gift the old damaged cathedral to the Crown for them to deal with.
Logan, we see that Nicky Wagner, who is the Minister, of course, and Leanne Dalzell, who is the Mayor, of course, were able to speak to the Synod. What was their message? What were they saying?
Yeah, so both Leanne Dalzell and Nicky Wagner have come out very strongly in support of option A. Leanne Dalzell said Christchurch cannot take any more indecision and they really needed a decision to be made now. Leanne Dalzell has pledged on behalf of the council $10 million of ratepayers' money to help a rebuild. Subject to public consultation, of course. And Nicky Wagner, as well, in the past has pledged $25 million in funding and loans from the government to help that process. And they both really want to see this cathedral rebuilt as it was. Actually, speaking to Nicky Wagner afterwards, she said she was cautiously optimistic, actually, that the Synod would vote for option A. So that still remains to be seen.
Logan, we've had Bishop Victoria Matthews on Checkpoint. She is a very strong figure and she holds singular opinions, really, about the future of the cathedral. How is the Synod responding to the input they are getting from far and wide and, of course, many different sides?
Well, it's quite interesting, actually, because last night Bishop Matthews spoke at the Eucharist, which is the ceremony that opens the annual Synod. The Synod is a bit like an AGM, and the Eucharist opens it. And she outlined all 3 options, didn't give, at that time, any strong opinions, but in the past she has publicly stated her support for demolition. Today, though, in the actual debate, there was certainly a very wide, diverse range of opinions that were put out there. Mark Chamberlain from Fendalton, St Barnabas in Fendalton, it's a church here in Christchurch, he strongly prefers option A. He thinks that the offer from the government is too good to refuse, and in fact he thinks that the community actually wants the building back as it was. However, Felicity O'Brien from a church in Linwood told the Synod today that the money might not actually come. They were just pledges at this point, and in any case she felt that the money could be better used elsewhere. The actual cost of rebuilding the cathedral as it stands right now, the church estimates to be the $108 million region, sort of around that $108 million mark. And Felicity thinks that's just too much money to be spending on a building, and that could be better used for social projects such as housing. There's also actually quite a bit of support for option C. One member actually said that the church does have a new building. It's the transitional cathedral that was built after the earthquakes. It's also known as the Cardboard Cathedral. It's the same. It's got the same capacity as the old cathedral. So some people said that could be an option as well.
How does the Synod voting process work? In other words, who will vote, when will they vote, and when will we know how they voted?
Yes, so it's a very traditional process. So there are 3 parts of Synod, so to speak. There's the House of Bishops, the House of Clergy, and the House of Laity, and they're all made up of different members of the Anglican Church across this area. And this area actually covers all of Canterbury, north-south Canterbury, the West Coast, and I'm also told the Chatham Islands. So it's a big assembly here today. Around 220, 225 members are here today. And each of those 3 houses there has to be a majority in each each of them for something to move forwards. Just as a theoretical example, the House of Laity could vote yay to a certain option, but the House of Clergy could vote no. So it could take quite a long time, and the actual voting process is set to start tomorrow, sort of tomorrow afternoon, just after lunchtime, and we're told that it could actually take some time. However, it's important to note that a spokesperson for the Bishop, Victoria Matthews, has said that they do expect a decision to be made, and they're going to be here for as long as it takes to get a decision.
Da, da, na, 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 na. That's what I was trying to do last night. Sorry.
It's magnificent, Katrina Batten.
You could have joined in,
yeah,
John. But...
no, that would have really ruined it. As flat as can be. It's 5:35. Katrina's singing because she's going slightly mad, waiting for the 5:30 headlines. So much feedback coming in. Thank you. We'll bring you a sample of it before 6. Some of it really quite upsetting from teachers and some of the things they've experienced. Katrina's got the headlines first.
Federated farmers are sounding a warning over Labour's climate change policy, saying it would damage the regional economy. Labour's promising to make the country carbon neutral by 2050 and gradually introduce agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. Federated Farmers climate change spokesperson Andrew Hoggard says that would cause hardship in the regions. A massive earthquake has struck South Mexico, with initial reports saying it was a magnitude 8. The quake was centred off the coast of southern Mexico, close to Guatemala. Buildings shook in Mexico City, and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Centre says widespread hazardous tsunami waves are possible. The Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management is currently assessing the tsunami damage to New Zealand. Hurricane Irma is starting to impact on Haiti after cutting a swathe through the islands of the Eastern Caribbean. The Category 5 storm, with winds up to 300 kilometres an hour, has now set a record for its sustained intensity, surpassing that of Cyclone Haiyan, which hit the Philippines in 2013. At least 14 people have died in the storm, and thousands more remain in shelters after their homes were damaged or destroyed. National's Christchurch Rebuild spokesperson Nikki Wagner has reaffirmed her support for reinstating the Christchurch Cathedral to the Anglican Synod. The 225-member synod is underway, with a decision regarding the quake-damaged cathedral expected this weekend. Nikki Wagner told the synod it would be a loss to the country if the building isn't rebuilt. The Transport Agency is warning the Lewis Pass in Canterbury may need to be closed at short notice due to ice and snow. The pass was shut last night due to heavy snow and had to be shut again this morning after a truck crash. The agency says drivers need to be ready for winter conditions tonight and this weekend, with more snow forecast for Lewis and Arthur's passes. So much for spring arriving. That's the end of the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Which is not very far away, Katrina, so don't go shopping or duck into town or anything.
I'll go and do some singing practice.
Okay, thanks, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Birchall. Briscoe's group reports Katrina could sing, actually. Briscoe's You Never Buy Better. Woo!
Briscoe's You Never Buy Better. Woo!
Oh, well done, Katrina. Clap, clap, clap from Wellington. Yeah.
Well, how are they going, dear old Briscoe's group? Jono?
John, I'm going to get to that in a moment. I just want to get to some news that's been developing in the last hour or so. New Zealand Oil and Gas, a bit of a takeover tussle appears to be brewing for them. A second partial takeover offer has come through from OG Oil and Gas. This is a Monaco-based company. They already own 4.3% of New Zealand Oil and Gas. They're offering 77 cents a share for up to 70% of the company. Now, this is a premium to another partial takeover offer from Australian-based Zeta Energy. They're offering 72 cents. So something's brewing there to get majority control of this company. That's all just come out in the last hour or so. But you'll remember New Zealand Oil and Gas reported a profit back in the black a few weeks ago. That was after selling their stake in the Kupe oil and gas field. They've since bought back into Kupe and have about $90 million to invest. New Zealand Oil and Gas says take no action at this stage until you see a target company statement. When the trading halt was lifted about an hour ago, the shares have since closed down nearly 3% to 68.5 cents New Zealand. But on to Briscoe Group, despite tough competition, a late start to winter, the company has reported quite a higher profit of $28.6 million. They, as Katrina pointed out, run Briscoe's, Rebel Sport. A busy time for them. They've been renovating stores, launching new stores as well, along with boosting their online offerings. And they say they're looking to develop New Zealand and Australia.
Fletcher Building increased its debt facilities with some major banks, John, I see from your notes.
That's right, $345 additional million with ANZ, HSBC and Westpac. Fletcher Building says this will allow them to work with their lenders for future funding needs. But what I take from this is that they're insulating themselves, making themselves feel more comfortable, rather than anything sinister. But you do remember, though, a few weeks ago, that hit to their building and interiors division, which we reported on quite extensively.
Yeah, that's right. Manufacturing sales volumes out today. I haven't seen them. What do they say?
Seasonally adjusted rise of 1%. That was really led by meat and dairy manufacturing volumes. There was a fall in petroleum, coal and chemicals production, but if we leave aside meat and dairy, core sales volumes were down 0.2% on the previous quarter. This is the last piece of the gross domestic product jigsaw puzzle. We'll get those GDP numbers out in a couple of weeks, economic growth numbers. Look for a figure around 1%.
Thanks, Johnny. How have the markets ended the week?
Solid gain for the top 50 index, up 47 points to 7,852. That Kiwi strong as well, 73.3 US cents, 90.3 Australian. John.
Jonathan Mitchell, great having you with us this week. Have a great weekend. Thank you. When money's tight, things like expensive dental visits are among the first things to be neglected. That was the case for Auckland mum of two, Kelly. She hadn't been to the dentist for 5 years until today. Kelly was one of 40 people who turned up to the Milford Family Dentist on Auckland's North Shore to take up an offer of free dental care for adults on low incomes. Hundreds more around the country have been helped as part of a nationwide campaign this week. Kelly met our reporter Joanna McKenzie at Milford Family Dentist on Auckland's North Shore just after her checkup.
I'm a very smiley person and I've got a big mouth as well, so if you can't smile your big smile with your big mouth, then you're bucketed.
After solo mum Kelly has paid her rent, she has $200 left over each week for everything else. So when she saw a story in the local paper about free dental visits, she jumped at the chance. Kelly was worried going into the consultation because she hasn't been able to afford to take the best care of her teeth over the last few years.
Don't have all the things that maybe I could have for oral hygiene. Obviously I clean and brush twice a day and floss, but you know, the electric toothbrush, etc., and the expensive toothpaste, that's sort of gone out the window.
But after a clean and a checkup, she only needs one filling. Also in the waiting room is Wendy, a pensioner who's struggled to afford dental care on a fixed income.
Everything has gone up. The rates, insurance, the cost of living in general has gone up. And your teeth are one of the things that you just hope stay there and don't hurt.
She's concerned about one tooth, so getting it seen by a dentist is a relief because the alternative isn't ideal.
Oh, I would just wait. Probably until it was too late. Just one of those things.
They're being seen by dentists at Cav Naidu's practice in Milford.
How's your day been today?
Time and equipment has been gifted to the campaign, which is run by the Dental Association and Southern Cross Health Trust. Dr Naidu explains what each patient can expect.
So we're treating them as a new patient and we're doing a full thorough checkup with examination x-rays and planning their whole mouth so they know and are aware of other issues so before they actually flare up and become like a volcano going off. So, and we're doing a form of treatment whether it's a filling, extraction or something else. Yeah.
Dr Naidu's patients today are not alone. A Southern Cross Health Trust survey of 2,000 people showed more than 70% have put off going to the dentist because of the cost. And Ministry of Health figures show only 47.5% of all people visited a dental health worker in the year to June 2016. Cav Naidu has other practices in South and West Auckland where they offered free dental care, and those days were packed out too.
At least get them out of pain or even a basic little mini makeover makes a big difference to someone. It really can affect someone's emotions and emotional well-being and to the extent of someone's self-esteem as well.
The campaign is in its third year with about 750 people expected to be helped this year. In Auckland for Checkpoint, called Joanna McKenzie.
Well, we began the program tonight looking at lunches in a Decile 1 school and lunches in a Decile 10 school in Auckland. 15 of 26 children in the Decile 1 classroom had arrived with no lunch. We have received an extraordinary amount of feedback, much of it from people just really distressed by that. This is from a Decile 2 intermediate teacher. And this teacher says, my class would also be similar to the Decile 1 in Auckland with numbers of students who need food. Lots are too proud to accept help. But the reality is if they don't have food, their behaviour is very disruptive, and this means many are not learning what they should be. Schools need extra funding and staffing to help them make sure all students are fed and warm. Kids can and fruit in schools is great, but it's not enough. I had a girl try to steal a tampon while we were having a puberty class so she could play water polo. Our school has only recently got tampons from Kids Can. This is just sad, New Zealand. Lots of people saying this is just sad, New Zealand. We need to look to Japan, where the children help prepare and cook lunch and clean up after. The class eat the prepared lunch every day. In Italy, a cook prepares a fresh, nutritious lunch every day very cheaply. In both cases, the costs are low. It would be good to see if these models could be adopted here in New Zealand. Kids Can should be fully funded for all schools. No child should go hungry. Better outcomes for all. And someone saying the fact we have hungry children has gone beyond being a national scandal. It's now a national tragedy. Thank you for your feedback. The Maori Party is signalling it would prefer to go with Labour than National if it's in a position to make a choice. As its party campaign tour bus weaves its way through big cities and small towns across the country, it's getting a clear indication from its supporters it wants a change in government. Now, in the latest RNZ poll of polls, the Maori Party is hovering just above 1%, enough to secure one seat, but not quite enough to bring in a second MP into Parliament, assuming it wins an electorate. It does have one, of course. Here's our political reporter, Maori Irma.
It's a big coach bus covered with the faces of candidates, supporters and Maori Party policies, and it's driven by 70-year-old Ricardo. Though that's Rick, Ricky or Rico if you're on board. He doesn't say much, but I'm told he was a New Zealand First supporter, now converted to the Maori Party ways. Though when I ask him, he just gives me a cheeky grin and wink. The first stop for the day is a marae in the small Waikato town of Morrinsville. There's kai, mingling and some political chat before we're all ushered back on the bus. The local Māori electorate MP for Hauraki Waikato, Rahue Papa, says the bus is a moving billboard.
You know, it's a bit of a head spinner. It's really cool driving down the main streets of town and people are tooting and waving. It's been really, really awesome.
The Labour Party has traditionally captured the majority of Māori voters, and Mr Papa says breaking that is the key.
We're really talking about generation voters. So we've had a lot of people that have come up and said we've always voted for Labour, but actually they haven't thought about that if you support a coalition partner, that's just as effective as supporting one of the main parties as well.
The Māori Party has had an interesting relationship with both National and Labour. The party was born out of the foreshore and seabed controversy when Tariana Turia left Labour to form her own party in 2004. The party president, Tukuroi Rangi Morgan, says part of their campaign this time around is to remind people that they are the only party that puts Māori first.
Our people are looking for a strong, independent voice away from the big parties. So they know that their desires aren't going to be compromised by the party line. And so, I'm confident that we will do well.
However, it's clear the Māori Party has suffered from its close relationship with National over the past 3 terms. It's gone from having 5 seats in 2008 to winning just 1 electorate seat at the last election. The Māori Party has insisted change can only happen if it's at the table. But there's a high chance the Māori Party would choose to not join with National again if National had the numbers to form a government on their own. If, however, National needed the Māori seats to get over the line, they may use that situation to gain some leverage in a governing arrangement in portfolios like social housing. Tukuroi Rangi Morgan says he's listening to his people.
There's a growing call for Māori across this country, actually, that the Labour, Green, Māori Party is a nice mix. So we're not going to presume any position until September 23rd. But that resonates with our people.
As the bus crosses through electorate boundaries, it drops off one candidate and picks up another. Howie Tamati, former New Zealand League player, is standing in Te Taiho Auru. He does some door knocking in Tokoroa as the bus slowly trails behind.
There's a light on. Hey, there's a light on. Kia ora.
Mr Tamati says he's had people promise to give him the candidate vote and Labour the party vote, but he's trying to convince people of the benefit of having a large Maori Party presence in Parliament.
If every Māori on the electoral roll voted for Maori Party, we could have 14 seats in the House and we would permanently be in a really, really hugely strong position and have a major say in how our people could live.
The Maori Party co-leader Marama Fox is in a tenuous position as she is unlikely to win her seat in the Labour stronghold of Ikaroa Rāwhiti. On its current polling, the Maori Party would only have enough support for one MP, and that's most likely the other co-leader Te Uraro Flavel in Wairiki. Another wild card is Mr Tamati. However, if he manages to win Te Taiho Auru from Labour, that pushes out the chances of Marama Fox returning to Parliament even further. Mō te hotaka o te ahi, ko mei herin tēnei.
9 to 6, some sport now. The All Blacks have been enjoying a touch of country life in the build-up to their match with Argentina in New Plymouth tomorrow. Taranaki is, of course, home to the three Barrett brothers. Middle brother Scott, who plays lock, took a group of curious All Blacks out to visit the family farm about 50 k's south of the Big Smoke along the famous surf highway, State Highway 45. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter, Robin Martin, has more.
With Geordie Barrett resting his injured shoulder and Bowden dealing with ticket allocations and practising his golf swing, it fell to Scott to play tour guide. And one of the big draw cards was mum Robin Barrett's famous scones. According to prop Tom Moody, they didn't disappoint.
To be honest with you, I made a bit of a pig of myself on them. So, Mrs Barrett did a very good job on her cheese scones, and her date scones weren't far behind.
And the tour and taste sensations didn't stop there.
Scott took us down to the milking shed, gave some boys a bit of milk straight out of the vat. And, oh, I'm a big fan of it. I love it. A couple of the boys, it was a bit different for them, but yeah. Then gave us a wee tour around, went up the light tower and the lighthouse. Yeah, good wee day.
The Barretts are rugby royalty in Taranaki, and Dad Kevin Smiley Barrett played 167 times for the mighty Amber and Blacks. Scott will make his first appearance as an All Black in Taranaki from the bench. He says playing in front of friends and family will make a difference.
Yeah, I think it'll be that extra bit special. I think any time you run out in the All Blacks jersey, it's a moment we cherish, and to do that at home, it'll be that much more special.
Grant Hassel is the president of the Taranaki Rugby Supporters Club. Enjoying a quiet coffee at Peggy Gordon's Celtic Bar, he says local supporters love nothing better than when one of their own runs out for the All Blacks.
The greatest buzz that they receive is when one of their boys achieves something special, and so we've seen it with Bowden a number of times, and that same sort of delight is also building with Scott and Jordan as well. Unfortunately, Geordie won't be involved this weekend.
Mr Hassel says Bowden Barrett, who scored the try that clinched the World Cup at Twickenham in 2015, is fast approaching immortal status.
He is Taranaki's favourite son at the moment, and history may record him as Taranaki's greatest ever son. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm for Bowden.
You won't find any argument about that from Taranaki mascot Ferdinand the Bull, who has donned the All Black strip for the weekend.
Yeah, tell me about the Barretts. What do they mean? What do they mean for you?
Well, you look at Bowden to start with. 4 years ago, he came here with the French test, played the last 2 minutes, scored a try, broke into the team, and now look at greatest footballer in the world.
Out on the rain-sodden streets of New Plymouth, there are other All Blacks who rate a mention, but not too many.
Around here, we're a bit excited about some Barrett family members.
Yes.
Yourself, you looking out for the Barretts?
Yeah, bloody oats. They're awesome.
Oh, the Barretts are gods here, eh? So, you know, it's, yeah, no, they're king. They're king.
Well, it's always good to see if Sonny Bull does well or bad, I suppose.
Obviously, SBW.
Yeah, Barretts for sure. Hopefully Bodie starts and finishes. They are the real deal. I went to school with them in Ocado, so yeah, good boys.
Probably Sonny Bill. Yeah, definitely.
Luckily, the children at the Cubby House Early Childhood Centre, who were celebrating the game with a 2-day blackout, understand rugby's a team game. The forecast at kick-off time tomorrow is for 8 degrees with squally showers. So wrap up warm, people. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, for Robin Martin Tene.
Another exciting aspect of the game tomorrow is, of course, Vaea Fafita getting his run-on start for the All Blacks. He is a really interesting prospect. In Christchurch, music is being used to help children suffering from the psychological effects of the earthquakes. New research shows 4 out of 5 children in the city are experiencing some form of post-traumatic stress. The Christchurch Symphony Orchestra has been keen to help and has teamed up with Banks Avenue School. It introduced the kids to the magic of music, culminating in a concert involving the whole school this afternoon. Conan Young went along.
Lucy Prattley and Angela Bree have been learning all about staying in time and how to get the best out of their giant plastic drums this week, as members of the orchestra took them through their paces.
The drummer guy, he said to turn the drumsticks up the other way so it makes it louder. The butt end. Yeah, the butt end.
And so these are big plastic drums, but you can actually make them make different sounds, can't you?
So you just tap on the side and then in the middle and out the other sides as well. It makes different noises. It's pretty cool.
Each classroom has been allocated an instrument or been instructed on how to make their own. Some are using their voices or hands to make music, while others are learning the power of song. Pippa Archibald and Joshua Peterson say with just a week to perfect their routines ahead of the big concert, handling their nerves is all important.
My stepmom told me this morning that everybody's going to be really nervous, and to just pretend no one's in the audience, just pretend that there's no one there and you're doing it alone, because I'm quite scared. I get stage fright in performing. I'm really scared.
How about you, Josh? You look like you're pretty cool, calm and collected there.
Oh yeah, I've performed in front of a huge crowd. It was fun. I was cool.
At a school that sits on the edge of the residential red zone, you don't have to look far to find reminders of the carnage caused by the quakes. A violinist with the orchestra and the head of its community engagement program, Kathy Irons, says music is a great way to restore confidence in the kids, many of whom come from families still struggling to get back on their feet emotionally and financially.
Initially, when we first come, they might be a little bit tearful, they might be a little bit scared of what's going to happen, a little bit tentative, and by the end they're really trying hard and they're relating to other children, they're relating to us, and not only that, but they're sharing their music with the audience, with the parents, with the community.
Kathy Irons says for her and her team of players, this week has been exhausting but incredibly rewarding.
Firstly, when we came along, there were a few kids that would sort of look at us as we walked in the school grounds. Now when we walk out, the kids run up to us, they greet us, they tell us what projects they're doing.
Earlier in the week, the school received a visit from the Canterbury University researcher who discovered just how many Christchurch children are showing signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. School principal Tony Burnside says the researcher was impressed with the difference the orchestra had helped to make to the kids' behaviour in just a week. She says post-traumatic stress manifests itself in a number of ways.
You get children who aren't sleeping, and we have a lot of really tired children. You get children who aren't eating, and so that part of them has been affected. You get a lot of attachment disorders where children don't want to be away from their parents, are really weepy, and we have toileting issues.
The school principal says a lack of support from the Ministry of Education meant schools like hers had to tackle those issues by themselves or with the help of neighbouring schools. That was where groups like the Symphony Orchestra came into play. The looks on the faces of the young performers at the grand finale concert today showed this school was well on its way to recovery. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
So much feedback coming in tonight. Thank you very much, everyone, no matter what you're saying. Susan Grimsdale from Auckland Central says, I grew up in a poor area in England after the war when the British economy was devastated. I got a free school lunch. Then I moved to Montreal in 1951 and the government provided a school lunch. The National Party's been in power for 9 years and all that time children have been hungry in our wealthy country. It's disgusting. Lots of people pretty upset by what they saw and heard at the beginning of the program tonight. Judy says, I cannot understand why NZ cannot follow the Scandinavian example of school lunches. It would be a small investment in all of our children's health, well-being and eating at the table, not in front of the TV, says Judy. Originally, I'm from Hungary, not considered a rich country by any means, yet 3-course lunch is served at lunchtime in primary schools And in kindies, my children spent a week in a school in Hungary and they loved having lunch at a long table with all the other kids. It is the best. A bit coming in on fed farmers too. Surely federated farmers should be providing leadership to its members, but once again it buries its head as far into the paddock as possible, this time rejecting a planned move to the inevitable carbon neutrality of New Zealand. Federated farmers are sadly way behind our more enlightened and responsible farmers. Thank you, Dave, and thank you all.
RNZ News at 6. Maloa Lele, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. A magnitude 8 earthquake has struck off the southwest coast of Mexico. Buildings shook in Mexico City. People ran out into the streets in pyjamas and alarms sounded after the quake struck just before midnight. Power went out in some neighbourhoods of the capital. The US Geological Survey is reporting the quake was 35 kilometres deep and centred off the coast near the Guatemalan border. Jana Persley is with the US Geological Survey and says it was felt strongly through the southern Mexico provinces of Oaxaca and Chiapas.
The shaking along the coast of Chiapas at this point is estimated to be very strong to severe. We do not have any information as of yet as of the potential for casualties and damage, but I would expect damage along the coast of Chiapas.
Jana Persley says there'll be some significant aftershocks felt in the region in the next few hours and days. Authorities here are now assessing whether the powerful quake could generate a tsunami along the New Zealand coastline. Civil Defence says if a tsunami had been generated, it's not likely to arrive in New Zealand for at least 12 hours. Federated farmers are sounding a warning over Labour's climate change policy, saying it would damage the regional economy. Labour's promising to make the country carbon neutral by 2050 and gradually introduce agriculture into the emissions trading scheme. Here's our political editor Jane Patterson.
Labour says it would enshrine the target in law and make all farmers pay to offset their emissions within its first term, starting with 10%. Federated Farmers and National both say that would impose unreasonable costs on farmers and would cause financial hardship in the regions. However, the Forestry Institute says at the moment other sectors in the regions pay the cost of farmers' emissions. It says there could also be real benefits, with farmers having an incentive to develop new, more environmentally efficient practices. This is Jane Patterson.
Political newcomer, the Opportunities Party, has received more large donations this year than National and Labour combined. TOP's leader, the economist-turned-politician Gareth Morgan, is the party's only declared donor so far, gifting $1.4 million to the 2017 campaign. Other big donors include Mainfreight founder and chairman Bruce Plested, who's donated $150,000 to the Maori Party after criticising politicians for their lack of action on the cost of housing, education and water quality. At the other end of the political spectrum, ACT Party founder Alan Gibbs, along with his former wife, art collector Dame Jenny Gibbs, have donated more than $200,000 to the party this year. Hurricane Irma is hitting the Turks and Caicos Islands after leaving behind a trail of destruction along a string of islands in the northeast Caribbean. The Category 5 storm, with winds of up to 300 kilometres an hour, has now set a record for its sustained intensity. Ahead of its landfall, the governor of the Turks and Caicos, John Freeman, says frantic preparations were underway.
We have started to fill our shelters because a number of people live in very low-lying areas, are very vulnerable. We've also engaged in terms of getting people off the island who are here, North American tourists and others. Up until yesterday evening, when the airport closed, we had extra flights moving people out.
The governor of the Turks and Caicos, John Freeman. There are also mandatory evacuations in the US state of Florida, which is due to be hit by the hurricane late on Sunday. And another hurricane, Jose, which is coming hot on the heels of Irma, has now been upgraded to a Category 3 storm. A man who sparked a nationwide police hunt after running away while on bail got his mother to pay for shipments of methamphetamine he ordered from within Rimutaka prison. 36-year-old Rolly Heke has been sentenced in the High Court in Wellington to 5.5 years jail on drug charges. He was already in Rimutaka prison for previous methamphetamine offending when he teamed up with another inmate to bring in more of the drug from Thailand. The sentencing judge, Justice Clark, says Heke's offending involved planning and premeditation.
To arrange importation from within prison requires a level of commitment and forethought and care which elevates the premeditation beyond the level that is intrinsic in importation.
Justice Clark said she could not consider Heke's efforts at rehabilitation because when he was granted electronic bail to attend such a program, he cut off his monitoring bracelet and ran away. More than 700 people on low incomes have received free dental care and treatment over the last week. It's part of a campaign run by the Dental Association and Southern Cross Health Trust to support people who can't afford to get their teeth checked. 27 clinics have volunteered their dentist time and equipment, and all have been swamped by people wanting to be seen. One dentist, Cav Naidu, has had 40 people through his clinic in Milford today for checkups, fillings, extractions and pain relief. He says while they can't fix everything in the short time they have with each patient, they can make people more comfortable. It's 6:05. Sport. Argentina may well have slipped back in rugby's world rankings, but All Blacks skipper Kieran Reid refuses to write them off ahead of tomorrow night's test in New Plymouth. The Pumas have won just 5 of their 18 tests since the 2015 World Cup and are now ranked 10th in the world, sitting a spot behind Fiji. But Reid says each time he's come up against the Pumas, they play nothing like a 10th ranked side.
They've been very tough opponents for us, even here in New Zealand. They're unpredictable. There's certainly got some players who have got experience in Super Rugby and at this level, so dangerous side.
Meanwhile, the 39-year-old Auckland halfback and former Blackfern Emma Jansen will become the first women's rugby player to play 100 provincial matches when she takes the field against Canterbury this weekend. A ruthless Madison Keys has dispensed with Coco Vandeweghe in straight sets, setting the stage for an All-American US Open tennis final that will see a new Grand Slam champion crowned. Keys' opponent will be Sloane Stephens, who beat 9th seed Venus Williams in 3 sets, 6-1, love 6, 7-5 in an earlier rollercoaster clash. It'll be the first time 2 American women have played for the title since 2002, when Venus lost to younger sister Serena Williams. The Cronulla winger Gerard Beale has signed a 3-year deal with the Warriors, joining the Auckland National Rugby League club from next season. The Queensland-born Beale has played 10 tests for the Kiwis and is likely to be at least one of 2 Kiwi internationals to join the Warriors next year, with Brisbane forward Adam Blair also expected to sign with the club. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the President of the International Criminal Court on the difficulties and rewards of treaty-based law and apprehending very bad people. Jonathan Bielski is back home after years at the Sydney Opera House to run the Auckland Arts Festival. And music writer Colin Hogg takes the high road to find out about decriminalised cannabis in the United States, but seems to drink an awful lot of craft beer. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Kapiti, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Showers, some heavy, a period of rain tonight or tomorrow morning with possible squally thunderstorms and hail. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloud increasing, rain developing in Wairarapa this evening, spreading north tomorrow morning, clearing to isolated showers tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, Marlborough and Nelson, scattered showers turning to rain this evening, clearing to fine tomorrow morning. However, isolated showers remain about Nelson. Bulla to Fiordland, also the Canterbury High Country and Southern Lakes, rain sometimes heavy with thunderstorms and hail, snow lowering to 500 metres from evening and to 200 metres in the south for a time overnight tonight. The remainder of Otago and Canterbury mainly fine. Southland, periods of rain. Snow lowering to 500 metres this evening and to 200 metres for a time overnight tonight. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers with rain tomorrow afternoon. It's almost 6:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too, John.
Yeah, I will. We began our program, just before we move on, Category 8, big earthquake off the coast of southern Mexico, just above the border with Guatemala. There was initial concerns that it might cause a tsunami and that tsunami might end up somewhere in our vicinity in about 12 hours' time. It looks like that has already been ruled out by Civil Defence. Right, we began our program tonight by going to Kingsford Primary School in Auckland, where we asked students of a combined Year 5-6 class if they could leave their lunch on their desks. Of the 26 children at school in the class today, 15 had nothing for lunch. Others had just a bag of chips or a biscuit. Of the 26, just 2 children had a piece of fruit. In contrast, we also visited a Decile 10 school where of the 19 students in class today, all had lunch and all had eaten breakfast and nearly all had a piece of fruit. Chris Williams is the principal of Kingsford Primary School, which is a Decile 1 school in Mangere. He told our reporter Zach Fleming up to half of his roll of 300 children come to school every day with no lunch. He says he isn't surprised that 15 children in one class had no lunch today.
No, that's normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill. That's the same every day.
And how does that make you feel, knowing that?
Makes me feel really sad. That's my main feeling, disappointed that there's no support. I think that poverty is a major issue in New Zealand that's just not being addressed. It's being swept under the carpet, and the sooner that it is addressed, the sooner that children, like the children in my school, can make accelerated progress. It's all about the children achieving and improving their outcomes, but if you're hungry, it's a major barrier, because when I'm hungry, I can't focus, and we are asking children to concentrate, and we're asking them to be involved in their learning, but when they're hungry, it's a barrier.
What kind of things do you notice when the kids come to school without lunch compared to when they do, or if they're hungry compared to when they're not?
Well, you can see it in the children's behaviour. When you're hungry, you play up, you become more irritable, and it's the same with children. They're a lot more short-tempered, squabbles can break out over virtually nothing, and they need to be the best that they can be. They've only got one shot at education, and we need to provide them with the best education possible, so that they can get out of the cycle, so that they can go to university and, become the best person they can be.
You said that not a lot is being done and you feel like it's being swept under the carpet. Are you talking politically there?
I suppose it is a political statement, because at the end of the day, change can only come from the top, can only come from the government. Being a school alone is not going to be able to address all these issues. There are many charities out there that support, but I don't think that we should be beholden to charities. I think that it needs to be a whole government issue.
What would you say it is? Is it a lack of will on the government's part? Lack of caring? What is it?
I don't think that they really understand the depth of the issue.
Have you been watching the political debates?
Not necessarily.
Right. So when Bill English announced, did you see he wanted to bring 100,000 kids out of poverty in 3 years? You saw that announcement? What did that mean to you? Do you believe him?
I find it hard to believe, given that they've been in power for so long and so little's been done. So putting figures out there to say that this will be achieved in our next term of office, I find a little bit unbelievable, yep.
It's Chris Williams, the principal of Kingsford Primary School, talking to our reporter Zach Fleming. 26 children in that classroom, 15 arrived at school with nothing for lunch. Now, Kingsford is on the Kids Can waiting list. Kids Can feeds nearly 30,000 children at schools around the country every week, but there's a waiting list of 30 schools, more than 3,000 children, which at the moment it can't afford to feed, although it's trying to clear the waiting list as quickly as it can. Zach Fleming asked CEO Julie Chapman how big the problem is.
We know from our numbers on average it's about 22% of a school roll that needs food. So when you extrapolate that out across the slightly over 1,000 Decile 1 to 4 schools, it's about 52,000 children. So our goal is to increase our food program next year. We have another 100,000 loaves of bread coming on board to create an amazing lunch program for children, and the goal is to be feeding all of those children within 12 to 18 months.
How much would it cost us in total to feed those 52,000 children?
Yeah, so we think that it'll cost us, we could run a program that would give a range of nutritious items to children for about $4.5 million a year, and that includes sponsorship from corporate partners, in-kind sponsorship and hopefully some more government funding. So in the great scheme of things, not a lot really, and that's our aim, is to get there.
So if you were given a cash injection tomorrow, within a week perhaps, you could get into those schools?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll take all offers of cash injections.
That's KidsCan CEO Julie Chapman talking to our reporter Zach Fleming. After leaving a trail of destruction and death across the northeast Caribbean, Hurricane Irma is now starting to lash the Turks and Caicos Islands before heading towards the Bahamas, and then it's projected to the US state of Florida. The Category 5 storm has winds of 300 k's an hour, still is pushing waves up to 10 metres high, well inland on some islands. It's a huge hurricane across a huge area. At least a dozen people have been confirmed dead. The storm lashed the north coast of Puerto Rico overnight and left more than 1 million people without power, even though the eye of the hurricane remained offshore. Aerial photos of the small islands left in its wake show roofs ripped off, cars and containers flipped over, major damage to infrastructure, homes and buildings gone. The BBC's Laura Bicker is in the Puerto Rican capital, San Juan.
Hurricane Irma, a storm the size of France, has carved a destructive path through the Caribbean. In Puerto Rico, 3 people were killed as winds battered the island. As daylight came and the clear-out began, most felt lucky to have survived such a terrifying storm.
I pray, go. Don't come here no more.
This family told me they felt blessed to be alive and that the only damage was a downed power line and fallen trees in their street. They've kept 8-month-old Aaron safe.
There is a collective sigh of relief here in Puerto Rico. There is work to be done. Up to 30-foot waves threw up debris and downed trees. But when it comes to that catastrophic eye of the hurricane, that only skirted this island, unlike others in the Caribbean.
In Barbuda, barely a building was left untouched. Hundreds of families now find themselves homeless.
My house, I lose my home, I lose my shop, also my vehicle, everything damaged, and right now I don't have nowhere to go to sleep.
We had cars flying over our heads, we had containers, 40-foot containers flying left and right, and the story that you're getting from most of the residents here is that the eye of the storm came just in time. Persons were literally tying themselves to their roofs with ropes to keep them down.
Barbuda's Prime Minister said the island was now barely habitable.
I mean, absolutely devastating. I would say that about 95% of the properties would have suffered some level of damage.
In neighbouring San Martin, the full force of the hurricane's eye was caught. Winds of 185 miles an hour hammered the island. More than 70,000 people live in this area, which is made of Dutch and French territories. Shipping containers were tossed around like Lego bricks. Moored boats were smashed in the harbour, and there are warnings that the death toll is likely to rise. France has sent 3 emergency teams to help with the clear-up and has already set up a reconstruction fund. In the British territory of Anguilla, there was criticism from residents to the UK response to the hurricane. It was labelled pathetic and disgraceful. A British task force is now on its way, including the Royal Marines and Army engineers, though it could take 2 weeks for them to get there. Efforts are also underway to try to get supplies to the island of St. Bart's. The French government say their priority is making sure people have food and drinking water. Hurricane Irma is not finished. She has maintained her wind speeds. The US Sunshine State of Florida will be next in her sights. They are nervous after watching others endure her wrath.
It's the BBC's Laura Bicker, an excellent correspondent out of Washington, by the way. Meanwhile, residents in the US state of Florida have been rushing to leave before the hurricane is due to hit in about 48 hours. Up to 650,000 people have left, and mandatory evacuation orders are now in force in the Florida Keys. Low-lying, really exposed. CNN's Omar Jimenez is in Miami Beach, where he says Floridians are bracing for a direct hit from Irma over the weekend.
We did just get a hurricane warning where we are here in Miami. That was the first warning that came through for South Florida. One thing that is good on that front is that the winds did downgrade to 165 miles per hour, but still a lot to deal with. Still a Category 5 hurricane. It's expected to make landfall here in the early Sunday hours is what we're looking at preliminarily at this point. But one thing that people are doing is that they are being told to evacuate as quickly as possible. The governor, Rick Scott, here in Florida, is telling people on both coasts of Florida to be prepared to evacuate in some way. We've seen mandatory evacuations in the Keys, the Florida Keys, and then in the Miami area, parts of them, and other parts as well. And one thing that really has added another layer to this evacuation process is as people have flooded the highways to try and get north away from this really powerful storm, we've seen gas shortages. Many gas stations are running out of gas very quickly. We've seen long lines. The governor here has tried to add more to that, providing state troopers to escort fuel tankers to refuel many of these places along evacuation routes, and also just bring gas from other states and nearby areas, again, to try and help facilitate these people getting out of the state. But it is going to be big, and Floridians are prepared, at least at this point, to what we've seen.
Irma, there is so much low-lying land there, the Keys in particular, just entire communities that are no distance above sea level. Are they all leaving? Is everyone going from those areas?
Yeah, so Key West, or the Keys, I should say, the Florida Keys in general, is under a mandatory evacuation, and the governor essentially saying if you stay there after the mandatory evacuation, there's nothing we can do for you, so people can leave it at that. Another thing that we should mention as well is this order is coming in contrast to what we saw just last week in Texas with Hurricane Harvey. Officials there told people not to evacuate. They told them to stay in place, to stay put, essentially citing that 6.5 million people couldn't leave that metro area without causing some sort of issues. We are seeing the opposite here, where they are calling for people to get out. And one thing to keep in mind as well is, as big as this storm is, the cloud cover covers 300,000 miles, which is bigger than would cover the entire state of Texas, and definitely covers all of Florida. So the only place you can go is north. There's no going east or west of this storm. And I think that's part of why we're seeing such a heavy emphasis on this evacuation.
Are people scared, Irma, because you are used to hurricanes, to tropical storms in that area, but there is a sense that Irma is beyond what you've had before, potentially. Are people scared about what might happen?
So there are people, I would say it's mixed. Floridians, they are no strangers to hurricanes. That is very true. But the one that many people cite here is Hurricane Andrew, which came back in 1992 and decimated the entire city of Miami. And the governor here is saying this one will be stronger and much worse than that, though whether that actually happens remains to be seen. But he does want people to take this as seriously as that one should have been taken. I can tell you that I have friends here and natives who, because they've gone through so many storms, feel as though, oh, this is just another situation, it'll blow over just like normal. So there are many people with mindsets like that. There are others who, I'll give you a particular example. One of my good friends, he is staying here with his dad, hunkering down. They have their generators. They've taken all their lightweight things out of their yard and will be here for the storm. Their mother said, no, I'm not staying. I'm going to New York. And so she flew and she's going to spend this next week with her family in New York. So I think that's a telling indication of where people are. Some think they can ride out the storm, and others just don't want to take a chance on what could be one of the biggest storms to hit the area.
CNN's Omar Jimenez in Florida. The ACT Party is languishing in the polls at around 0.3%, but its electoral lifeline, the Epsom seat, will almost certainly guarantee David Seymour returning to Parliament. Voters in the wealthy Auckland seat are well versed in voting strategically to prop up national governments, and they look likely to do it again. Our reporter Sarah Robson went to test the pulse of this electorate.
Hi there, ma'am. How are you?
Good, thank
Hi,
you.
I'm David Seymour.
I know.
Well, it's nice to
Back in 2014, David Seymour was a first-time candidate and political newbie. He won Epsom by a margin of over 4,000 votes. 3 years later, he's a familiar face to the voters of Epsom, and with National giving him the nod again, it's likely ACT will keep the seat it's held since 2005. But he admits he hasn't knocked on as many doors as he did last time around.
It's mainly just because I've had 2 jobs, or 4 jobs actually, if you count act in Parliament and then being in government and Epsom MP, whereas last time I was full-time as a candidate.
David Seymour says voters in New Zealand's wealthiest electorate are worried about a range of issues.
6 months ago it was immigration. For whatever reason that seems to have almost stopped entirely. I suspect it's partly due to the fact that the Waterview tunnel has just been absolutely transformational for this whole area, and the congestion's reduced, so people are less worried about that now. But generally speaking, it's school zones, and it's, for a lot of people, it's just maintaining the government that is not going to, spend a lot or destabilise the economy.
Does David Seymour reckon people are voting for him because they think he'll do a good job, or because National has told them to vote for him?
I think if anything, I'd like to think that we've probably got people more into the voting for David because I think he'll be a good MP, and less, vote for this guy because that's the part of the strategy. And there's still a spectrum of people in that, but the voting for David vote's probably got a bit bigger, and the voting for strategic reasons probably a bit smaller.
ACT is polling at 0.3% according to the latest RNZ poll of polls. Winning the Epsom seat is crucial to ACT's survival, but is there really any contest? To get a gauge of it, I jumped in my car and went in search of election hoardings. I've just driven down Shaw Road, where there are a couple of billboards urging voters to put a tick next to David Seymour's name. Despite the fact National was given the nod to Mr Seymour in the seat, there are still a few billboards around the place featuring the face of National's candidate here, Paul Goldsmith. So what's National's strategy in Epsom? More than 60% of the party vote in Epsom goes to National, and Paul Goldsmith says his focus is on growing that. But he's not actively telling voters not to vote for him.
Oh, so look, it's entirely up to them who they vote for. We've indicated that we're happy with the ACT candidate having the electorate, but we're very focused on the party vote, but it's up to every individual.
And what do the voters think? On the streets of Remuera, all but one person I spoke to was giving their electorate vote to David Seymour. So what's the appeal?
Because they're the only rational economic party.
Because I like him, and yeah.
Do you think he's done a good job over the last 3 years?
I think he has, yeah.
It's to support National. We want to see National returned, and David Seymour is a very visible candidate in fairness.
Get 2 members of Parliament that way. I'll be voting National.
Labour's David Parker and the Green Party's Barry Coates are also standing in Epsom, but like Paul Goldsmith, they're running party vote-focused campaigns. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Finally tonight, let's go to the Manukau Institute of Technology in Auckland, where staff and students have gone all out today to make a school ball a bit more special for the students from James Cook High School. Here's Laura Tupou.
A couple of weeks ago we reported that James Cook High School had an op shop, pop-up shop at their high school. So what we've got today is MIT kindly donated some of their students to do some of James Cook High School students here for the ball tonight. So we've got 3 students here and we're just going to talk to them about what they're getting done. Hello, Atta. How are you going?
Good, thank you.
What are you getting done today?
So I'm just going to go with big curls and big curls at the front, and the rest will be medium at the back. So, yeah.
Pretty happy to get it done for free?
Yeah, really happy to get it done for free.
And what are you wearing tonight?
I'm just going to be wearing a red dress and black heels.
Did you pop into the shop at school?
Yeah, I liked it. It was really good. And there's a lot of dresses to choose from.
Are any of your friends wearing any of those dresses, or any of the suits or the jewellery or the shoes? There's heaps of stuff there, eh?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff, and I know of a lot of my friends that are wearing it. And yeah, really happy.
Excited about tonight?
Really, really excited.
And we've got Leanne here. Leanne is a senior lecturer at MIT, and Leanne is the person behind all of this. So tell me about how you found out about James Cook High School.
I was driving home, and I live quite far away, so I'm always in a queue of traffic, and I came across with Grant on the radio saying how his students had put this all together and how they were just wanting to make everybody look good and feel good for their night and their special school ball. And I thought, wow, what an opportunity for us to actually help out, and let's take it even a bit further and do the hair. So we've got the facilities and the students to do that, and we need the experience and they need the hair done, so put it together as a package.
And it's all very local. I mean, there's schools just down the road.
Yep, it is. And next year, hopefully, we'll even take it further and take it to more schools and advertise it a little bit earlier. I mean, it's a little bit late this year, but it was only because we heard about it on the radio, or I heard it on the radio. But next year, hopefully, we can advertise it a lot earlier, and then we can book a lot more students in and help them out and give them a great night for their school ball.
Fantastic. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
So the school ball's tonight at Alexandra Park. I will be going to it, so listen in on Monday for Checkpoint and you'll hear all about their experience.
Nice work, Laura. Nice work, MIT. We hope you have a wonderful ball, James Cook High. Thank you for being with us. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A magnitude 8 earthquake has struck off the southwest coast of Mexico. At least 2 people have died, but civil defence here says there's no danger of a tsunami. Federated Farmers says Labour's plan to introduce agriculture into the emissions trading scheme would damage the regional economy. Tenants evacuated from a block of flats in Wellington a week ago are still in the dark on when they'll be able to return home. And Hurricane Irma has hammered Puerto Rico and is now scooting past the northern coast of Cuba, heading directly for Florida. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Country Life hops on board a mobile surgical bus this week that's been used to carry out 22,000